And you almost feel overwhelmed. Like, if everyone's got the answer, I don't. Then you find out, these people have embezzled money, or they got fired, or they're in jail, whatever it may be. And I think, look, everyone's got some great ingredients. I think some work better for others. And what I've found finally at this stage of my life, and I could have done a better job in my career, is maybe take a little bit of an ingredients from each person, take in the good, hold out the bad, and make it your own. And I've kind of done that through my career, is just take the ingredients from different people. Sometimes it's 50%, sometimes it's 80%, sometimes it's 2%. Sometimes it's, I don't ever want to be like that, but it's an ingredient that helped me. But make it your own. Don't be so, not insecure, but so influenced that people have their shit together. Most of them don't. Find out what works, find out what doesn't work, and make it your own.
This episode is brought to you by Trident Coffee, a veteran-owned brand and lifestyle. And while they're masters of cold brew, Trident's beans are roasted to create a flavor that shines whether you drink it hot or cold. There's no bitterness, there's no burnt taste, it's just good tasting coffee. Their coffees taste amazing hot, which is how I prefer it, while still designed to excel as a cold brew. But Trident Coffee is more than just great taste. Trident supports your wellness journey, featuring ingredients like organic mushrooms, adaptogens, and nootropics. It's made for those who enjoy good coffee and value quality and health. So if you're looking for a coffee that meets you wherever your day takes you, hot or cold, you need to check out Trident Coffee. I know I said I prefer hot coffee, but here's a tip from me. Mix their instant cold brew with your favorite protein for a protein coffee drink that's great cold. You can thank me later. I know there's a lot of coffee options out there, but give Trident a try. I know you'll enjoy it as much as I do. Head over to tridentcoffee.com and use the promo code TDP15 for 15% off your order. That's TDP15 for 15% off your order. My guest this time is a retired firefighter. He was literally on the verge of his actual retirement date when we sat down to talk. He has spent over 30 years in service between time as a county lifeguard and then as a city firefighter. He promoted up to the rank of captain. However, he spent the last couple of years in a temporary promotional position as Operation Battalion Chief. Like many of us, the career had some negative impacts on him. He had 7 back surgeries. Also, when we sat down to talk, he was just coming off the recovery period for the most recent back surgery. As he worked his way through his career, he realized the importance of mentorship and bringing along the next generation coming into these careers. As he heads into his retirement, he's got plans, and he's already offered his help to young firefighters and first responders from that mentorship perspective. But his first and primary mission heading into his transition is his family. Like many of us, he took and made the job first and put his family on the back burner. And so his first priority right now is reconnecting, so to speak, and making his family the priority in his life, besides other ideas that he's got for the future. He's got a lot of good information. This was a very enjoyable conversation, so let's get into it. Here's episode 176 with Dave Shenbaum.
So I'm not a podcast kind of guy. I mean, I do speak to people in the media and stuff, but
then why'd you agree to come on a podcast?
But what do you like? Do you like hands here? Do you like them here? Does it matter?
You're actually,
what comes across more
if you've
authentic?
been watching, this is the very first episode we're doing with these mic arms, because the previous ones mounted actually in these spots right here, and they sat lower to the table. And I found that people didn't put their hands on the table because they kept bumping. So I'm trying to get this area clear. So whatever's convenient. Okay. You'll find that I'll probably just sit like this. I may sometimes just lean back.
I'll probably do both, yeah.
So just be comfortable.
All right. Sounds good.
You mentioned something before we started recording that not only have you done lifeguard, but you also did search or some type of rescue in Mammoth?
Worked on the ski patrol in Mammoth in my early years.
So have you, that like pretty much just been your whole life?
My whole life has been really since graduating high school in public safety, of some sort. When I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't an academic kind of guy at all. My brother was. He went on to Northwestern. We're very close. We're about 18 months apart. I think my family was somewhat disappointed, not disappointed in a loving kind of way. Grandparents, maybe the Jewish grandparents from New York, maybe a bit disappointed that I wasn't a doctor, or went on to be a doctor or a lawyer, but definitely the first person in my family to go on to like public service. But just, the normal school college routine wasn't for me. I went to a junior college for a year after high school, went back and coached my local high school, kind of was struggling on finding my way. And my purpose for sure was just kind of serving others through public safety type stuff. So it really started for me with the Los Angeles County Lifeguards. And I was a swimmer, had a swimming background, didn't really grow up in the LA area, the LA coast at all, more of Newport and Huntington Beach in that area. And took the test with LA County and got hired, and it really changed my life. So I was a LA County Lifeguard just until my recent back surgery last year. So 34 years with the county as an Ocean Lifeguard. And in the early days, I would spend my time in the winter up in the Mammoth Mountain Ski Patrol. And then got hired by the fire department that I spent 31 years with, and was a paramedic and spent a great career there. And then part-time, still keeping the relationships and working for the county lifeguard all those years as well. And the city that I worked in bordered the ocean. So it was a great relationship for all those years.
So the one key piece that immediately jumps out to me, and we've already got a small connection in where we kind of grew up, and we'll get to that. But you mentioned New York. So is that from your mom's side or your dad's side?
From both. Both parents were born and raised in New York in different boroughs. And so both parents were first generation Californians. My dad moved out to go to school. He went to USC. And then my mom moved out as a young girl and went on to be an art teacher and a teacher for her career.
Did they know each other in New York, or did they meet here in California?
No, they met here in California, kind of near where you grew up, actually. Just a young couple kind of put it together. And my dad, his father owned a small retail men's clothing store, and my mom was an art teacher, and that's how they met and raised two knuckleheads, my brother and I.
So were you born in West Covina?
Yes.
And how long did you spend there?
18 years just after high school, 18, 19 years. Yeah.
Where'd you go to high school?
West Covina High.
Oh. So, because we're probably close in age. I'm 55.
Yeah, 56.
Okay. So when you were a kid growing up, Royal Oak was still a high school.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and then they switched over, and I think a lot of them go to Charter Oak now.
Yes.
Yeah, and still have a big footprint, friends and coaches and stuff in the West Covina area.
What took you to the beach? Now, you mentioned swimming. Were you a beach kid growing up?
Not really, because it was about 45 minutes to the beach. So we would go. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like a daily event. So my brother and I were very active into sports, mostly baseball, football, and then swimming was the big one for me. That really helped me get through school and competing at a higher level. And it was just after high school, not kind of knowing what to do. It was as a young kid making good money, working as an Ocean Lifeguard. So I took all the tests, the state, the county, the city of Newport, Huntington, those small things. And the county was the largest. Proud to say they're the largest lifeguarding organization in the world. The most professional for sure. And it was just a great fit. And I was very lucky to kind of find them when I was a young 18, 19-year-old kid.
Were you good in school academically? Just had no desire to go on to college?
Not really. I was dyslexic and really had struggled kind of with school and academics and really moving into my profession later and promoting through the ranks, had to learn how to study in a different way. Going to paramedic school was super challenging for me. It was the first time that I had to really big boy up and learn how to study as opposed to, high school, cheating off your neighbor's paper, where now in the real world, I really had to learn how to prepare and study. And that really helped me later on in life in preparing for promotional exams and stuff like that.
You mentioned that your parents they probably weren't the most happy that you didn't go the college route. But growing up, were they pushing college for you and your brother?
I think it was a strong, very loving and caring parents. And once we kind of went our paths, I think they realized I went the right path for me and that my brother went to the right path for him. But, you want your best for your kids. So, yeah, just the formal academics wasn't my path. And in hindsight, it was the right call for me. I do wish in reflection that I would continue my education. I really push that for the young guys and gals that work for me is, even if you just chip away at a junior college level while you're working, or try to get your AA or your BA while you're working. And there's, with online programs now, it's so much easier than it was in the old days. So there's some benefits for sure. I don't think it's a must. And, but in some ways I wish I would have went back and got that. It certainly would have helped me throughout my career by having those degrees.
No incentive as you were promoting up to go back to or get into college?
There wasn't, because, I was raising 3 children. I was always, I was the firefighter that wanted to work, the busy stations and the brotherhood. And I was very active in my personal life, and then getting married and having children. It's like getting pregnant. There's no good time. There's no good time to go back to school. But throughout my career, it became easier for people to go back. And probably if I started my career now, that would be a no-brainer, just to go back, get your online degree early on in your career.
What introduced you to Mammoth? Because that's not really local for us here in Southern California. Were your parents Mammoth skiers?
They were, yeah. So Mammoth's about a 6-hour drive for your viewers. And really, it was a wonderful neighbor who was a mentor of mine, who was an outdoors kind of guy. So their family and our family would go to Mammoth, a couple times a year, and kind of found my love for the outdoors, skiing. So that really became a part of it. And then when I was a young kid, I worked at a Chick's Sporting Goods. It's not there anymore. It was purchased by Dick's Sporting Goods some years later, but it was a boutique sporting goods store out in that area. And I got into skiing and racing, and that was kind of one of the drives. And a wonderful rep of one of the ski industry suggested, hey, you'd be great. My brother-in-law's a supervisor up there. Why don't you? So I did. I looked into it, and it was great. It's really a wonderful, for me, the lifeguarding agency and the ski patrol in my early years, and I was only there for a couple of years. It was these men. You're working with men, and you're this young 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old impressionable kid. So it was a great way to kind of learn how to work hard, learn how to keep your mouth shut, and just a great work ethic in the early part of my career. So it was a good time, and I reflect on it often, and really enjoyed those times.
I'll take you back even a little bit further, just a little bit of reminiscing. Remember Oshman's over there on Citrus?
Yeah, totally. That's so funny. Yeah. So that takes me back.
But the Chicks you worked out was the one right there, also on Citrus, but just up the street a little bit?
Yeah, in Covina, Jim Chick. My dad and Jim Chick were good friends.
Oh, okay.
Jimmy Chick, his son, was my age, and so I think my junior year or something, started working there. So I was there for a couple years, part-time on and off.
You mentioned racing. What type of racing?
I just like ski racing, like the local mountains, like Tuesday night races, stuff like that.
But like the downhill style racing?
Yeah, but nothing, very low level, just a bunch of amateur knuckleheads, nothing to write home about.
No, never any to the point that it drug you in enough to try to go to the next level?
It would have. I think at that level, you really got to be living on a mountain and be putting in the hours, and I just didn't have that. So, I considered, being on the patrol as a professional patrol. So working professionally for those few years that I was up in Mammoth. But racing, you just got to put in the time. And I just wasn't physically living on a mountain when I was a young kid.
Right out of high school, straight up to Mammoth? Or was that just kind of a part-time gig for the
winter? Yeah, full-time for the winters. No, it was, I think I was 19 or 20 when I started. So yeah, 20 right after, because I hit my 21st birthday up there as well. So I would bounce back and forth. So in the summer, I would put my time in lifeguarding in Santa Monica, Venice, that area for the county lifeguards. And then in the winter, head up and work the winters up in Mammoth.
What drew you to service? I mean, I know you mentioned that nobody else in your family, but what was the draw for you?
It's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know. And I don't think I even knew at the time that it was providing a service or giving back to the community. Back then I probably thought it was just a bitchin' job and I'm getting paid for it. But no, I think inherently there was some sort of draw, in there for me. And I think my parents would agree that was kind of a calling.
Was the draw more to lifeguarding and then you found firefighting? Or was it firefighter who happened to be a lifeguard?
For sure. Lifeguarding first. Then, and actually there was such a hiring freeze back then and affirmative action, I wasn't getting hired full time. So I was a young paramedic, young lifeguard, on the list to be hired, but there was this big hiring freeze in the county. So it was really by chance that one of my bosses, our chief at the time, said, "Hey, you should go back to paramedics. You should go to paramedic school." So I did, and then that led to the fire academy, and it was really in lieu of not getting hired full time by the county. So it's kind of by accident. I wasn't, a firefighter kind of guy or mentality at all. It was definitely more of wearing the red shorts and being a lifeguard, and that was had some wonderful mentors, and it was a great job when I was young, and then I continued it, for 34 years once I switched over and became a full-time firefighter.
So but you weren't doing it while you were in high school, any type of like junior lifeguard program or anything like that?
Not really. I taught swimming summers and stuff like that, as, part of the swim team members would do that. But no, it wasn't until I did these, tested for these agencies and did the swims and stuff like that, that I got hired by most of them and took the one that was, I thought, the best fit. And it was the LA County Ocean Lifeguards.
Now, with that starting out, is that a full-time job? So where I'm going with this is during the winter, what does an LA County lifeguard do? Are you still on the beach?
You drive up and work on the ski patrol, man. No, you are very low seniority. You only pick up, time in the summer. The more seniority you have, the more it spreads out on the shoulders of before summer and after summer. And then once you get enough seniority, it can be a full-time job as a recurrent lifeguard like myself. And if you choose to take the test and promote, and if you get hired as a full-time person, then it's just like becoming a cop or a fireman. And now you're a full-time person, and you're driving the trucks and in a full benefits and all that kind of stuff.
Going the route of putting yourself through paramedic school for somebody who's a lifeguard now might be thinking, I want to go to fire or become a firefighter. Is that still a good way to go?
You mean going through the lifeguard route first?
Putting yourself through paramedic school?
Yeah, for sure. I think it just gives the organization that's hiring you a bigger bang for the buck. You're making yourself more educated, more valuable. Almost every fire department now are dual functions, and they want firefighters who are paramedics. There's just a need for them. I mean, look, 80% of our calls are medically related, so it makes good business practice to hire kids who are already paramedics and then train them to be firefighters. Doesn't mean you have to go that route, and not all agencies do that, but it tends to kind of get you a little bit higher up on the list. Some departments might hire just paramedics who are fire academy graduates, as opposed to just EMTs who are fire academy graduates, or just kids that are California driver's license, and now you got 3,000 people showing up for a test, and then those agencies put you through their own academy. So it helps.
This is the early 90s that you're trying to get on, right?
This would have been, really the early 90s, late 80s, yeah.
Now, fast forwarding to today, from your perspective, is the fire service seeing the same issues that law enforcement is, and just not a lot of people coming through the front door?
I'd say the short answer is yes, but the long answer is not nearly what law enforcement is going through, for sure. We have definitely had some issues with recruitment, unlike we have ever seen before. I mean, we joke in our profession, there's two lines, the long line, and those are the firefighter applications, and the short line for law enforcement. And we kind of joke in our profession like that. But in my 31 years in the fire service, we have never had an issue with recruitment or retention. And the last, 4 years, it's been a big deal. It's been something that PD and law enforcement has been struggling with for a long time, and finally has moved over into the fire service a little bit.
When you were looking to get hired, you mentioned starting out at LA County as a lifeguard. Now, is there a direct correlation with LA County's lifeguard and firefighters?
There's really not. There's a barrier. When I got hired, there were two separate entities, two separate departments within Los Angeles County. Since then, in the mid-late 90s, LA County Fire Department took over the county lifeguard, so they became a division of, which is a great fit because the lifeguard division is now a division of big LA County Fire Department. But they're really separate entities. You don't really kind of cross over those barriers. Now, there are many people like me that are both. And so, but they just have different employee numbers, and, you have some full-time LA County firefighters, and they just happen to be LA County Ocean Lifeguards on their days off.
For the ones, though, that were full-time lifeguards at that time when the transition happened or when the absorption happened, did they just get grandfathered and become firefighters, or did they still have to go to firefighter school?
No, and when they merged, they're like different divisions, so you had no opportunity to kind of come over and blend in. I think they gave a couple opportunities that you could kind of apply, kind of backdoor and go to the academy, but you'd have to test and go to the academy like everybody else. So there was a big wall between the two. Yeah.
What drew you, or what was the interest to get into Orange County, or was it just merely taking opportunities for you?
You mean Orange County, or?
I'm sorry. Yes, Orange County. Because you got hired with an Orange County agency for full time, correct?
Oh, no, I just tested with all those different departments like Huntington, Newport, the state, that kind of stuff. I think geographically, and I think just what the organization had to offer, the county, just the LA County, was a better fit for me.
When you became the firefighter, though, it was with an Orange County agency, correct?
No, I work as a full-time firefighter up in LA.
So then I'm not following correctly. Oh, wait, no. The Manhattan Beach is not Orange County. Why was I thinking that it's LA County, or vice versa?
Right.
My mistake.
No problem.
The cities like Manhattan Beach, is the lifeguard part of their fire department?
No, that's a great question. And that's, it's so confusing with all these small beach cities. So in Los Angeles County, all these small little pocket cities are their own entity or city. But the Los Angeles County lifeguards have contracts with all the cities. So they provide 72 miles of coverage on the ocean for lifeguarding. But these small cities are still independent cities with their own police departments and their own fire departments, unless they contract out with the county for sheriffs or fire. But most of them are independent cities.
So that's where I'm going with it. So once you got on, did you not get do they not have a beach component other than calls for service?
Not really. It just calls for service. But it was a great fit for me because now I'm working with not only my brothers in the fire station, but I'm working with my brothers on the beach with the lifeguards. So it was great for my whole career to kind of still have my foot in the door and work for the lifeguards and still kind of be a liaison for the South Bay fire departments that can kind of speak both languages. And there was a handful of guys and gals that did that throughout the LA area.
Does the agency have any type of, I'll call it an advanced team or swiftwater rescue team or anything like that, where your lifeguard experience kind of gave you a leg up?
A little bit. So I put together a water rescue program for our department and some of the surrounding fire departments, who some have some phenomenal watermen. So why not train them for a water incident, whether it be a drowning off the pier or a pier-related incident. We heavily relied on the county lifeguards with their resources. They're so close. They're very well staffed. But in the times after hours when they're not around, my philosophy was, let's train the firefighters, who are strong watermen and women, to perform those rescues, at least give them the tools and the training if that situation was to arise. But for the most part, it was the lifeguards that provided that service. And then after hours, having some sort of water rescue teams in the South Bay that could perform that. For Swiftwater, that kind of moves more into the bigger, the county, LA City, LA County, and they would have Swiftwater teams. And eventually they brought in the county lifeguards as well to be a part of that. Because as you know, in law enforcement, it's like you got a fire bubble and then these lifeguard bubbles. But then you realize you got 1,000 lifeguards who are rock solid. You might as well move them into the big picture of helping with some of the water portion within the county of Los Angeles.
Did giving up the dedicated lifeguard life/service kind of give you any reason to pause, or were you kind of okay with stepping away from it?
You know, it was definitely my first love, and the fire department was, as I mentioned, kind of not an afterthought, but it was an opportunity that showed itself when there was this hiring freeze, getting hired by the lifeguards. Eventually my time did come up and I had to turn down the full-time spot with the lifeguards, but it was a great fit for me. I think if I would have got hired back somewhere else in inland, it would have been really tough. But for me, I still continue to be a part-time recurrent lifeguard and work full-time with the Manhattan Beach Fire Department. And again, was still actively involved in training with the lifeguards and being that liaison to the fire guys. So it was a good decision for me, and I think everything worked out great. One thing I missed is I kind of came from the boat section, and being a paramedic, worked out on Catalina Island. The lifeguards provide service out there. You have 2 rescue boats, 2 trucks. You do all the dive accidents, and all the paramedics calls for service on the island as well. So I missed that part, but it worked out well for me.
You mentioned that the opportunity came up, but you'd already been with Manhattan Beach Fire. Was it just kind of one of those things where, man, I've already got myself established here, I'm not going to go back to being the new guy?
A little bit, but it was a little bit, but I also thought it was more consistent being in the fire department. Once I got into that, I had so much invested in the academy and that kind of stuff. It just kind of worked out great. I kind of had the best of both worlds, to be honest with you. I had the fireman schedule, 10 days a month. That was a big factor, and hey, 10 days a month, that means I could work on the beach 20 days a month. Not great for the relationship, but it was fun and it worked out well.
Now, you mentioned you put yourself through EMT school. Did you also, prior to getting hired, put yourself through the fire academy?
Yes. So paramedic school and the fire academy.
If you hadn't, this is kind of always one of the things that's interesting to me. Most law enforcement agencies, especially here in Southern California, the smaller agencies generally contract with the sheriff's department to provide academy services. What's the route for fire departments?
Yeah, so usually it's like through a junior college or a college that will provide a fire academy, and most of them are pretty good. I mean, there's a handful in Southern California, not a ton. There might be 4 or so. They're pretty established. The other so you can go through that route and put yourself through, and you're just a more desirable candidate. If you're an EMT, you're an okay candidate. If you're a paramedic, you're, again, a higher desirable candidate because that agency doesn't have to put you through and pay overtime for someone else to fill your seat while they put you through. And there's a possibility you don't pass. And now, the agency has to pay for all that. So the other option is a lot of the larger departments put you through their academy. So LA City, LA County, Long Beach, Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena, some of the bigger departments, they don't really care where you went through. They're going to put you through their own academy anyway and kind of certify you through their process. So that's kind of how it works in the fire service. I know it's so different than the police departments and law enforcement.
Yeah, because for most, anybody who puts themselves through an academy, especially in California, anybody that picks you up is not going to generally put you back through the academy. They're going to indoctrinate you into the way that agency works through their training program.
Right.
I'm assuming that's probably how Manhattan Beach Fire works.
It is. So even these small cities that may not have a huge, 18-week academy, they'll indoctrinate you in their own. We call it a mini academy. So I know, like, law enforcement has post, or we have certain certificates. So even if people have gone through a certified fire academy, once you get hired by your home agency, you'll be going through their own mini academy to figure, to indoctrinate you in there in how they want you to do things.
What year did you come on with Manhattan Beach?
Manhattan Beach, I came on in 1994. And
how was that for you being full-time now as a firefighter? Did you find that it was what you were looking for?
I did. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I think, getting hired, I had the best of both worlds, being hired by the largest lifeguarding agency in the world, and then get hired by kind of a smaller size fire department. So there's pros and benefits of both, for sure. And the opportunities that I had in a smaller fire department, and being able to be on so many strike teams and wildland fires, and the budget and purchasing, and being so involved in your department is a curse and a blessing. And I think in a large organization where I have many friends, it's the same thing. In some ways, you could work in on a helicopter or a boat or a downtown high-rise district, but so it's all a give and a take on what works for you throughout your career. But it was a great run, as I put it. And I didn't even tell you this, Paul, but I'm done in 4 days. I'll be off the books. And yeah, it's been a great run.
I know, and we're going to get into it. It's a little bittersweet, but congratulations on it. I mean, to get to that point, I'm coming, actually this month, I'm a year removed from mine too. So retirement's not bad.
It's not bad. And I've had a little preview. As we talked off air, I had a 2-level back fusion surgery a little over a year ago. So it was a bit of a prequel of what retirement looks like. I wasn't hiding it that I was probably not going to come back from this. I think, given the different opportunities or positions that might be open, it'd be tough to go back to the fire engine physically with a 2-level fusion, but going back to an admin position or something would have been a little bit easier. But I think it was a good decision. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
For those that don't know Southern California, and for those who aren't dumb like me and can't remember that Manhattan Beach is actually in LA County, Manhattan Beach is not a really big city.
No.
How many fire stations?
We have 2 stations. We have 30 members, and it's about 45,000 people. We have all these small beach communities: El Segundo, Hermosa, Manhattan, Redondo, Torrance. And we all act as like one large battalion. So we know everybody, and we have auto and mutual aid. We drop boundaries. So if there's a significant incident in one city, we all go. It's all predestined in our dispatch system. We share a common dispatch center. So it works really well. Other than being one large department, we train together and we run calls together. And even on simple medical aids, if one city is tied up and busy, the other seamlessly comes in and runs calls like it's their own city.
Getting into your career, of the 2 stations, is there one that's more sought after within Manhattan Beach Fire?
A little bit. I mean, we call it downtown, it's just by the beach. It's a little busier, a little more in the center of the hub. And then the other one is the east side of Sepulveda, we call it. But there's pros and cons to both. The east side is a little bit slower, but that's the fire engine that would go on wildland calls. You can be out for, 2 weeks at a time. So I worked both quite a bit, but I kind of like to be a little more busy. And I had a young crew most of my career. The people that gravitated around me like to train, know our job, and we're very proud of that. So tried to always stay pretty busy. So, and I like to be around more people, so it'd usually be the headquarters station.
For a lot of young people, one of the things I try to tell them is when you're coming into these careers, these professions, you really need to be thinking about what do you want out of your career and kind of choose the agency you're going to work for accordingly. Because a smaller agency, Manhattan Beach Fire, only gives you 2 station options, not a lot of diversity as far as extra assignments, so to speak. Was there ever a point for you, a couple of years into it or whatever, like, man, I had a taste of LA County. I know what the big agency's like, and feeling like, I missed it?
Later in my career, I think I had that. I didn't know what I didn't know. Right. And that's kind of what I do now, or the last 10, 15 years of my career, is really talk to the young people and say, hey, prioritize where you want to go. What are your interests? For me, it was a great fit because I still had a footprint by the beach and kind of the culture that I loved and enjoyed. But there was nobody there to tell me, hey, you're going to a small fire department. Are you sure you want to do this? There was no one there to do that. So I think that's really important. But young men and women, whether it's the police department or fire department, my daughter's boyfriend, they've been together for quite a while. He'd like to be a police officer. I've done everything I can to put him in the long line to the fire department, but he's interested in being a cop. And that's what they're prioritizing right now. Hey, where do you want to live? Do you want to commute? Do you want to be a part of that community? Do you want to be a gunslinger your whole life that comes at a cost, a personal cost with your relationships and your friends? Or do you want to go? So we're really trying to find a mixed, balanced city that, 1, supports their cops, 2, has great pay and benefits, and that they maybe have a diverse call for service. And I think the younger generations did a better job of that than our generation. I wouldn't say I just jumped at Manhattan Beach. I had a couple offers all at the same time. Back then when it was the hiring freeze, I tested with quite a few departments. And then they all kind of fell in line together. So I was kind of lucky that I was able to kind of pick and choose, but a lot of people don't. So they just jump on the first opportunity. And hey, if you want to work Bakersfield, that's great. It's a great community, great area. But now you're stuck with Bakersfield for 30 years unless you want to start over. And civilians don't understand. We start over.
Starting over is the big one.
Big one, and it's not so much as a big lateral. I know PD's doing a little more lateral stuff, but for us, there's no lateral. I mean, you might lateral over with your retirement system and stuff like that, but you're starting over. And the earlier you do it in your career, the better. And it's much harder to do it when you're later in life.
I think that's the one thing that from our generation that we definitely share that the younger generation or the newer people coming into the first responder community today is you got hired by an agency and all of a sudden you get 2, 3, 4 years under your belt and just the little perks become big when you start thinking about, all right, for law enforcement, maybe by 4 years, 5 years, you started seeing the taste of, I might not have the whole weekend, but I got Sundays off or something like that. And now all of a sudden I'm going to be going back and I'm guaranteed I'm working Friday, Saturday, Sunday night shift. And so if you've already started a family by that point, all those little things just made lateraling hard, or starting back over again hard.
Right.
Young people today are like, hey, you know what? And I give them credit. They're like, this agency isn't working for me for whatever reason. I'm going to go try somewhere else. I don't care if I'm starting back over at the bottom. And for your overall happiness and mental health, that's not a bad way to look at it.
You know, it's funny you say that. I think it's a different mental mindset, and it sounds like we're in the same. I wanted to work for an agency for 30 years. That's my commitment. It's a long time investment. That was my mindset. I never thought about leaving until things got bad, which we'll talk about later. And I think these young people do. I think, and I don't want to say young people. It's just, I think there is a different mindset of, I don't want to say jumping ship, but moving from one organization to another is okay with some people. And I'm not judging. It just wasn't a thing for me. And I don't think it was a big thing for our generation and previous generations. But now departments are luring, especially law enforcement. Hey, come over here. I think the city I live in, Torrance, Redondo Beach area, I think they're offering $100,000 for laterals to come over.
If you want to chase those incentives,
right,
there's money out there. But you're constantly starting back at the bottom again.
Right, exactly.
You know? So I guess, you know what? Maybe if it's one of those things where you never establish enough seniority to where the perks, you don't mind missing them and you just go chase the dollar. However, at the end of the day, I truly believe it's on you. Do what makes you happy.
Right.
If working for an agency, you're like, I want to commit to this agency for 30 years, then do it. You know?
I think for me, it was a lot of luck. You know, I didn't look at MOUs. I didn't look at salary and benefits and retirement programs. I fell into a place that had a pretty good established MOU. My daughter's boyfriend that we're looking at, I mean, we're looking at MOUs. We're looking at retirement systems. We're looking at force hires. We're looking at, is this a community that has a culture of staffing their organization what they need to be and not just backfilling with overtime. Look, overtime is great for a short period of time, as we all know. And, but to rely on it for the rest of your life, I mean, it's, you know, it's like boxing. It's like body shots. They add up over years and it really takes a toll on you and your relationship. So I think I wish someone was around to shake me and say, hey, look at these things. They matter. Although I don't think any of us go into this profession to get rich. I think you're naive in today's era not to look at those things, to guide you to a city or a county that's a good fit for you and your family. I'll tell you, we have a lot of cops and firefighters that are commuting all over the place. I mean, 2-hour commute. I have friends that fly to different locations. I got a buddy who lives in Costa Rica and works for Los Angeles City Fire Department, but it works for him. Wouldn't work for me. But I think living within the community you serve has its benefits. I think it's really tough driving 2 hours to, you know, out in your neck of the woods. A lot of people live or work in the LA area, but then when there's special events or, you know, your partners or peers and parties to go to, it's hard. So you're a little bit removed. So, you know, you just got to figure out what works best for you and figure it out. But for me, it was good. It was, stayed with one department my whole career, lived in the South Bay, in the area, part of the community. And then I could also be part of the ocean community that really started my service.
And that is one of the detriments, you know, it is the catch-22. There are professions where you're not going to make a lot of money. Yeah. Like you said, if you're living off overtime and you could make a lot on paper, but what is the ancillary or what's the secondary negative impact? You're not at home very much. You're not probably getting proper rest. So there's going to be a trade-off. But at the same token, like you said, the ability to live and work in the same community is huge. And for many of us, trying to afford the cities that we work for, especially here in Southern California, is difficult.
Very difficult. And I have three daughters. Super proud of all of them. My oldest, Sarah, just graduated from ASU. She wants to go back and get her master's and be a teacher. My middle daughter, Jenna, is at Boulder, Colorado, living her best life. Go Buffaloes. And my youngest daughter is a senior in high school and is our little stud athlete and wants to play Division I soccer. But I look at them and there's no way they could live in the area that they grew up in. I mean, even renting would be very challenging for them. So I think it's really important to find, if you want to serve in public safety, to find a place that you can afford and that can, you get a paycheck that you can afford to where you want to live. Because in the South Bay where I am, it's so expensive. And, how can a, 26-year-old afford $1 million home?
Yeah, it's crazy. And I would really like to be able to look even just in the mid 80s of, average income and stuff and compare it. Has it grown equally and is basically the amount of pay in relation, but it just seems like the rent or the living costs just have exploded exponentially.
I think you're right. I think that the second, especially in my area in the South Bay, I think it's exploded exponentially at not keeping up with salaries. So even though, look, cops and firemen, we make great salary and great benefits, don't get me wrong, but I think some of the rent and some of the home prices have kind of pushed them out of the market, so to speak. And that's why they want to, have a better lifestyle. So they move in the suburbs and they can afford, nice homes. And but then what comes at that cost is a, hour and a half, 2-hour commute.
I got very lucky to live and work for my first city. And I lived there in the city for 10 years. But it was only because I bought my house at the first bubble in what was 97, 98 and picked up a short sale. I couldn't have afforded it at the height of the market. There had been no way. And you start factoring in, and I was never one of those people that I would always say, I'll sacrifice the size of the house for my drive, in the sense that, yeah, my buddies were buying houses further out east and they were huge, beautiful, brand new homes, but they were spending an hour on the road each way.
Right.
Just wasn't worth it for me.
It's all a balance, it's what works for you. And that's exactly right.
You eventually promoted up. Was that a goal or an aspiration starting out, or what kind of was the catalyst for that for you?
Definitely not a goal or an aspiration. I wasn't the kind of guy that, said, this is what I'm going to be. We've had people that say, I knew when I was 22, I wanted to be the chief. I'm like, holy shit. Okay. Well, I don't want to work for you. No, I just wanted to be the best, young firefighter, paramedic that I could be. I really enjoyed being busy, running calls. And then at some point you start looking at the, the promotion, the position next to you, and start to learn that position. And hopefully you have good mentors and people in that position that want to teach you that. So I also think in public safety, a lot of it is timing and luck. Where are the openings? When are they going to happen? So a lot of it was kind of right place, right time, luck for me, and promoted up through the organization. And I promoted a captain at a pretty young age, maybe 8 years or something like that. So, most of my career was in that rank. And I enjoyed it. It was a good rank for me. I liked that position. I had a lot to learn because I didn't really know much at all until I got in the position and looked around and went, holy shit, I'm in charge of a crew. You can't fake it anymore. So really went back to learn my trade and my profession from that position operationally, personally, and even just even informally in the fire station, how to lead a group of men and women. And so it wasn't easy. And I think it came somewhat naturally, but I had to look myself in the mirror and say, this is no joke. Don't fake it like a lot of people do. Go back and learn your job. Got to give a lot of credit to some of the surrounding agencies. I'm a big fan of LA City Fire Department, LA County Fire Department, Long Beach. And those are the brothers that I went to talk about guys who are the real gunslingers in the fire service side and say, hey, teach me what you know. Teach me the lessons that you've learned. More importantly, the failures that you made in and out of the station. So operationally, it was really important to me to know my job, keep my people safe, but to be aggressive. I did want to be that kind of aggressive firefighter who knew his job, where I would hope young firefighters would want to work with me on my shift. And I think that's what happened, in the career. Just like law enforcement, we have some just rock stars, some great people who really know their job. And we also have a lot of people I call the turds, and I try to work with them and try to bring them up and raise them up. But sometimes it's tough, and then it gets frustrating as a supervisor. But I usually had just a wonderful group of people on my shift, and that really dedicated to the profession, wanted to train, wanted to know their job, and were more interested to pay it forward to the younger generation. So I'm really proud of that more than anything as I reflect on my 31 years in the fire service.
You remember early on, were you somebody who sought out mentors, or were you just kind of a sponge of everybody?
Little bit of both. And now that I look back, as I'm 56, my brother and I were really blessed to have phenomenal mentors in our life, but didn't know it until we were probably in our 30s. I mean, wonderful coaches and teachers, phenomenal, like legendary coaches that we just thought were our coaches and our friends, and through family or whatever it be. And then you find out, they're in the CIF, Hall of Fame, and you're like, oh, wow, well, that's just, Coach Bob Mount, or hey, that's just Greg Gano. So those were really influential people in our lives, for my brother in his profession now, and I think for me in my profession, who helped guide us. And we have two loving parents who are wonderful and supportive, but in a completely different way. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think mentors are such an important part of our profession that we're missing. We're missing good mentors. We're missing hungry mentees, and putting those two together, I think is really important for our profession to stay successful and productive.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things in looking back from the start of my career. I never really sought out a specific mentor. It was always one of those things where, in my eyes, I was looking at the people who I thought did it right and the people that I thought didn't. I don't want to say did it wrong, but just not the way I would want to do it. But if I was to give some advice to somebody starting today, is find that person who's going to take you under their wing and really mold you into what, again, it goes back to, what do you want out of your career? And is that person going to be able to guide you properly?
I think that's great advice. And I couldn't say it any better. I think I was just stupid lucky and had wonderful mentors in my life. So, and then I have sought wonderful mentors later in life, but I think I was just very lucky in my early part of my career that mentors kind of fell my way, were gravitated towards me, helped me. And because of that, I've never forgotten that. And I try to continue to do that throughout my career, and even today and into retirement for sure.
You ever feel like your body just isn't keeping up the way it used to? We all know that life doesn't slow down, and sometimes the grind shows up in ways that we might not expect. Lower energy, focus that's a little off, maybe even motivation that isn't quite there. Human Performance TRT knows what it's like to want to get that edge back, and they're here to help you do it without the runaround. A veteran and first responder-owned company, they're not just your typical telehealth service that just hands out prescriptions. Human Performance takes a full view of your health. First, you hop on a video call with one of their expert providers who goes through your goals, your blood work, and any specific needs you've got. From there, they create a personalized plan that goes beyond just hormones. If you need support with mental health, they've got it. If you're looking to get serious about weight management, they can coach you through it. The best part, they keep it flexible. No locked-in subscriptions. As you progress, they're checking in, making adjustments, and keeping your health plan up to date. Because what works today might look different down the line. Everything they do is sent right to your door, hassle-free, so you can stay focused on the things that matter. And here's another benefit. If you're already on a hormone replacement program or have recent blood work, Human Performance makes it easy to transition. If your lab results are less than 6 months old, you could submit those directly. No need for new blood work. They'll review your current levels and build a customized plan based on where you're at now, so you don't have to start from scratch. It's just another way that Human Performance puts you first, meeting you where you're at on your health journey. Human Performance TRT is built around your success. This isn't a one-and-done approach. It's ongoing with real guidance, because your health deserves more than just a quick fix. If you're ready to take the next step towards optimized health, check out Human Performance and see what a real personalized approach looks like. And for listeners of the Transition Drill podcast, use the promo code TDP for 10% off throughout the entire time you work with Human Performance. So head over to hptrt.com and remember to use the promo code TDP, that's Tom David Paul, for 10% off your program.
That's probably the biggest thing that I'm trying to do now for others, and kind of pay it back and pay it forward.
Captain, the first level of management?
Yes. I'd say it's more of like a mid-management position.
So you're still running a call and you're still out on a truck daily, even
Correct.
as a captain.
Right.
When you mentioned before that you now, last 15 years, have been working with younger officers, kind of, how did you make that? There's arbitrarily just what comes with promoting and taking care of your people. There's another thing, though, to give back on a bigger scale and really wanting to kind of be involved in helping the whole organization, so to speak. Where was that motivation come from?
I think at first it kind of started maybe in a selfish reason. I wanted to see good people promote in the organization, and just not the smart ones, the bright ones, or the ones with a gift of gab. but the people that really cared for the organization. So if I saw deficiencies or areas that they needed help, they would kind of come to me, or I would go to them and say, hey, let's work on this or that. I was one that had the gift of gab, and I went to mentors to help me in the areas of my shortcomings. And then they ended up becoming my strengths. And I know you do a lot of stuff with MMA and jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. And I'm not a big fighter kind of guy, but actually I did do 5 years of Krav Maga and a little bit of rolling, but I use it as like a jiu-jitsu guy. If you're weak on your back, start training on your back over and over. And I think at some point your strength becomes rolling on your back, and that's your dominant position. So that was like that for me. I've just found areas that my weakness, building construction, roof construction, electrical, stuff like that, I turned into my strength by not knowing much. And then my mentors would help me and guide me. So
a firefighter with a side hustle? I don't believe it.
And that, well, not necessarily a side hustle, but to help with promotions or to help then pay it forward to the younger people, or just that now I can go out and provide training to my crew, and not coming from bullshit, but that I really knew what I was talking about. Not necessarily that I had the experience, but that I spoke to people who did have the experience. I mean, look, if you don't run the calls and you don't have the experience and you're not interested in training, then where are you getting your knowledge from?
Right.
And it's really important that you're either the gunslinger and you're doing it every day, and that's where you're getting your knowledge and you don't need a whole lot of training, or you need to do both. And in the area that I am, you need a little bit of both. And it's, don't bullshit the guys. And, if you're not running the calls and getting that experience through real calls, then you got to bust your butt through training and talk to the guys who are really doing it every day, day in and day out. And not just telling them what they're doing great, because, cops and firemen will tell you that all day long. What were the mistakes they made? What would they do different, on that type of fire, or that roof incident, or that vehicle accident, whatever it may be. And those are just slides that I just kind of kept putting in my head and learning and writing down, and then always sharing that with my crew and people, and then helping people with promotional exams. That was kind of a big thing. So people helped me study and prepare. We'd kind of get everyone in a room, and no matter what position you were testing for, it was a value of those other members. So we would have one, every now and then at work, we would have something called career day. Well, I'd say, hey, let's everyone just switch seats. So, I'll ride backwards, and the engineer will ride in the captain's seat, and the fireman will get to drive. And it's great for everybody. Great perspective for me, because now I got to work, and just not put my hands in my pocket, but actually, try to do some stuff. And it gave them a sense of responsibility and what the job was like. And then they could become, prepare and take a promotional exam. And hopefully, our goal should be promoting our members, behind us. And if we're not doing that, I think it's kind of a failure of your own individual legacy, in a way.
What you talk about, and I don't know if it's just a natural culture shift, or we've improved, obviously, over the last 30 years plus of my career. That type of job switch, just little things like that, was not something per se that I remember seeing when I first started. Definitely was something more prevalent when I ended, and it was something that I definitely bought into on my own as a leader. From the culture of Manhattan Beach Fire, were those things that you were doing more driven by you, or was that the whole culture of your organization?
It was not a healthy culture when I started in 1994. So that was part of the reason why I had to seek out mentors in my profession and other agencies. I think now it is a part of the rich culture. I think some of the younger members are totally paying it forward, and they know their job, and they're doing their best to train the younger members, and super proud of that. And that's their legacy leading. So, I think it's hit and miss in every organization. I think it really is a cultural thing that you have to buy into. Some cultures are just so rich in certain things and so weak in others. But in that one, I think in my 30-year career, I think the pendulum swung from one extreme to the other in a good way.
Not that you guys aren't already loved enough, but post 9/11, what was the impact on you and your agency? Did you send any firefighters to New York?
We did. For a small department, we sent two amazing guys, Jeff Sanders and Tim O'Brien. They were our technical rescue people, very passionate in technical rescue stuff. And so we sent them in the first early days on a military plane, since they were all flights were canceled, airspace. in the United States. So they went over in a military plane and they helped dig and perform for several weeks. And kind of a backstory, I haven't thought about this in years. A local company, it's not Boeing, but a large company in the South Bay, I'll try to think of it in a minute, or medium-sized company. They had invented this tool. It was a small hand tool, and it had like a 22 round, without the projectile in it as the blast, and it would compress and cut rebar. So it would have a clip of 30 rounds, and you'd stick it in like a rebar and hit the button, and it would just cut stuff, and you wouldn't need battery operated, and it wouldn't be hydraulically operated. The inventor of that was on one of the flights that went in to one of the Twin Towers in New York, and he was killed. And in about 2 days, the company reached out to the South Bay Fire Departments and said, hey, our creator of that tool was killed. We have several of these tools. How can we get them to New York? So Jeff and Tim took those to New York and used them and handed them out and left them there for the members in New York to continue the search and stuff. So that was really a neat kind of story. But no, I mean, it affected us. As you say, a lot of where we are, they love the firefighters, and we have a great relationship with our community. I don't know if it affected any of us. And look, I think in a short time, everybody forgets that stuff, unfortunately. We had a gentleman in town who got a lot of the steel from the buildings, and he was amazing. And we've turned several I-beams into an art feature and have them on the corner of our fire station. And it's a really nice way to pay tribute. I think a lot of people just pass it and don't realize really what it is. But every now and then I'll go out there and just kind of pay tribute to the guys who came before us.
I think for me, and I equate it to back when we were kids in school and we all heard about Pearl Harbor, but it was just something you read about in a book. You knew it happened. You knew it was a tragic event, but there was no connection to it. And then I'm looking now with enough time and enough laps around the sun where there are young kids today, 20 years old. Again, it's just something they read about in a book. Obviously, those big events impact certain generations differently. We experienced it. We went through it. And I know, obviously, law enforcement from Southern California has sent people, but I know fire really had a huge impact in the number of firefighters and rescue personnel that went to the ground zero, and not even just New York, even into Washington.
We had one thing I think New York did right after the incident, after the attacks, was they sent their members, New York Fire, I don't know what PD did, or Port Police, and they sent some of their members that were struggling out through the country and to just have coffee with other members and just tell their story in any way they wanted, just authentically. And we had Bobby Sen, an amazing guy who came not long after September 11th, and so anyway, he came to our area and just sat around a coffee table, and that led to a little bit of a presentation, if you would, but in a very humble, authentic way. And that became an automatic connection for us, is that we're not reading it from a book. We're talking to a guy who was there that day, who lost best friends and family members. We then went back the first year for the parade, a bunch of us in the South Bay. So we went back 2 years in a row, and it was pretty eye-opening. I mean, the first year when you were marching in the parade and you think you're Bob Bitchin in your fire department uniform and everyone waving at you, and in front of you is Paul's kids wearing his uniform, hanging off 2 feet over their fingers because they're 9-year-olds walking in their dad's uniforms because he's not there anymore. So that was a great experience for me, kind of in the middle part of my career, the early part of my career. That experience, and to be a part of something bigger, a part of something larger, and to see the ripple effect of not only losing some of your members, but how then it affected, a generation, a culture, families. So that was an amazing experience. And I give a lot of credit to the city of New York to send these members out to hold these, coffee table meetings and to be able to meet Bobby Sen and then to go back. And it's those things you never forget in your career. I'm sure he's forgotten about me, but I've never forget about him and the stories that he told and the courage that it took for him to sit around a table of 30, 40 guys and tell his story over and over.
But, and where I want to lead this into is the growth of our awareness, because you mentioned, Maddie, in the awareness of our mental health and how that changed. I'm sure for you in the fire service as well as I did over those 30 years. But when you look at, like you said, what NYPD did, maybe it was some of the guys who needed that breath of fresh air. They needed to get out of their environment. And I know you'll hear this analogy often. What military members experience when they're deployed, horrific. But when they get to come home, there's very few reminders. Whereas for us, we have a traumatic experience. Take it to the level of 9/11 and Ground Zero. And those service members every day are going by that area, and just reliving it. So being able to completely pull them out of that environment and put them someplace completely new had to be a huge benefit to them.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, I'd have to go back and talk to those guys how it benefited them. But, firemen and cops and, maybe the military is doing it a little bit better than we are, now finally in the 21st century after not doing it so well for our veterans. But I think we're still not getting it right with mental health and wellness. It wasn't really my focus for the first 2/3 of my career, like most of us. And now looking back, I'm not a peer support kind of guy. A lot of people come to me to talk and stuff, but that's not my wheelhouse. Although I think by default, I just am a listener for people to come to me. But I'll tell you, I did it wrong for a long time. I think I'm still doing it wrong. But we're not putting our money where our mouth is as chief officers when it comes to mental health and wellness. And I can't speak for the military or veterans. That's not my lane. But for cops and firemen, we are still not doing it right. But we're tooting it. We're talking like we do, but we're not. And I think just look at the statistics. Just talk to the boots on the ground. Why don't you just do some anonymous surveys to patrol officers and firefighters, and it'll be glaring that we're not doing it right. And I don't think it costs much money. I don't think it takes that much investment to get it right, to find out what it takes to, I'm not talking about kids' gloves and to baby our members, but to figure out how we can make them more productive and efficient and effective officers, cops and firemen, and in the same time, make them better parents, fathers, wives, spouses. And I'm kind of bummed that in the 21st century, we haven't figured that out, or we haven't been all in on that investment, because I think it would pay dividends for the agencies with PTSD and disabilities and IOD, stuff like that.
The sheer number, or the sheer increase in numbers of our members who are taking their lives because of what they're experiencing is, I do believe it's something that we can turn the tide on that. Maybe it starts day one. Maybe it's, hey, you chose a difficult profession. There's no way around it. We can't, like I said, we can't put kid gloves on it. You are going to see the worst of the worst, but you've got to find a way today to start figuring out what works for you to deal with it, and encourage that from the get-go, as opposed to, like when we started, just deal with it and move on with it. It's the job. That might work for 3/4 of your organization. It's not going to work for everybody.
I think he hit the nail on the head. I mean, I am a little bit more of a touchy-feely talking kind of guy, but that's the kind of stuff I don't want to talk about. Like, I'm not going to go in a room and talk to some peer support. I was on a kind of a gnarly incident early in my career, and they brought over a priest, for me, and they brought him all the way over to, it was a long story, but here's this like bad Jewish firefighter, talking to this priest, and he was a nice man and everything, but it did no value for me. I think there's good intentions, but it was more of that checkbox. Paul, I think what you said is really important, and it's got to start at day one. It's got to start in the academies. And there's no reason why we don't extend the academies a day or two. Talk about what their life looks like in 5 years. Talk about what their life looks like in 10 years, in 20 years, and then in 30 years, where we are. And until we do that, you could talk to me this kind of stuff when I was 20 years old. I would just tune out. Like, I just want to run calls, 20 calls a day. And I'm stoked to be up all night. That's a different Dave than it is, last year. So I think we can do a better job within the academy. I think we can do a better job than circling back with training throughout their career. And I'd really like to talk about the mentorship is bring back people, the gunslingers, the hardworking, the guys that really love, and the gals that love their profession, bring them back to talk. Don't bring some psychologist or some doctor. Bring back the people who had the great reputations of their organization to talk to these people to say, hey, be a good father, be a good mom, be a good spouse. And here are some habits and some ways to do that. Here are some pitfalls. Here are some potholes that you are going to step in. Be aware of it. And believe me, I stepped in them throughout my career. I have it was a great run. I have so many wonderful memories. I also have a lot of regrets, and most of them are personal regrets on how much I put into the organization. Wasn't fair to my family, wasn't fair to my children. And I have a rock star woman. She's my North Star, my guiding light for sure. But it came at a sacrifice. I'm surprised we're still together. And it's because of her patience and my arrogance and my ego of wanting to be there for the organization. I didn't get caught up in, drugs or alcohol or cheating on my wife. That just wasn't my fix or my thing. But what I did do is became available to everybody, to the organization and to every member around me. And when the phone would ring, I would answer it, and I would leave the dinner table and I would rush into work for that emergency. And it's never really an emergency, right? It's an overtime issue, a policy issue, or, someone needs to help with something. But in hindsight, this is where the 56-year-old Dave would do a great service to talk to the 30-year-old Dave. And those opportunities are there to bring those members in who have retired or close to retiring, who have a great reputation, to talk to the younger generation that, as you promote up from the department, find purpose and meaning in your profession and in your life, but don't let it come at a cost. And I think our ego gets in the way. I think a lot of times when I would drop everything to go to work, it wasn't necessarily for that incident. I think it was my ego to be involved and to help others and to be the fixer. And, it's taken me a long time to figure out that probably wasn't the best bet. There's a balance. So sometimes it was appropriate, most of the time not. And I could have spent a lot more of that time with my wife and my family. And, I'm lucky that I'm recognizing it now, and it's with good friends and people, and that I can reconnect with my wife. I think I'm driving her crazy being home from recovering from back surgery. Hey, what are you doing? You want to go for a walk? You want to walk the dog? Where are you going? And she, Dave, I'm going to the bathroom. Jeez, man, relax. So I'm reconnecting with her for the first time. And we started dating when I was working on a shift schedule. To be home every day and underfoot, we're both trying to figure each other out. But I think having good mentors going in, not the psychologists, not the peer support geeks, but good members going and talking to the young academy members, and then the 3-year members and the 5-year members and the 10-year members, saying, hey, this is what worked for me, but more importantly, this didn't work for me, and share those. And I think if they respect those people, which those would be the hand-selected people to come in and talk to, I think that would pay dividends for agencies, for police officers and firefighters, and even military people. I mean, I just can't speak to them, and I don't want to. I want to honor them and what they go through, but for cops and firemen, for sure.
One of the things you said, one of the things I like about doing this podcast is somebody will say something and it will spark a thought in my mind. And what you were saying, you didn't get into the drugs, the alcohol, that type stuff, but you were 110% into the job, and it had an impact on your family. And what I was thinking with this is, we tend to give more, I don't know what the word I want to use is, but for the men and women who get deep into the substance abuse, we give them a lot of leeway, but we put more emphasis on that. Man, you came back from drug and alcohol abuse or whatever it was. But if someone was to get up on a podium and give a speech and say, I put 110% of myself into this job, and it took me away from my family. And where I'm going with this is, if you had spent 20 years in a bottle, going to the bar every night after work, when you came home, spending that evening or that day or whatever, drinking, or you're at the station every time there's an opportunity for overtime, you're still away from your family. One is not more acceptable or less acceptable than the others. It's all of those things that we take away from those that are around us.
It's your bottle. It's your fix. It's whatever mechanism you're dealing with to cope with. Exactly right. So it could be, drugs or alcohol or just being so into work. The SWAT team guy that just never leaves. I'm sure you have a lot of friends and people who have been on the show that do that. Our dear friend who connected us, Matt Domiancic, he's a chaplain, but when you meet him, I call him the badass chaplain. I mean, he does not fit the part of a chaplain, the guy that drops F-bombs and looks like a SEAL Team 6 member. But tacticalchaplain.com, I think, is his thing. He really helps a lot of people out. But his new push is, I've never heard the term before, left of bang, and more of a military term, right? Let's get to the incident or whatever it is, the left of bang before we hear the bang, as opposed to right of bang where we have injuries and explosions and stuff. Same thing with mental health and wellness. So let's try to get to the left of bang of people when they're healthy, not when they're all fucked up with drugs. There's all these resources for those guys and gals, or a big cushion of these people who are, have drugs and alcohol addictions. But I think there's far more people left of bang that are just coping and dealing in other ways that are very subtle. And for me, the subtleness was kind of all into work, and I think it was more my ego, than anything else, and not being there for the family. I mean, I was there for the family, but I hope I'm not exaggerating, but it was, dropping everything to go in for whatever that day's emergency was. And maybe some of that was a smaller department where you wore many different hats and were involved in so many different things. But now, as I think of it, even in a large department, I have friends that are just so involved. They're there 24/7. So, in reflection, I just wish it was that I had a better balance and that I could come home and turn it off. And, but it's hard. It's hard for us. I'm sure, we identify with this uniform. Hard to take it off. I think you have to learn to physically and mentally take it off when you walk in the door to say hi to your significant other or your children. I think we have a certain archetype, and you got to be aware of it. They can be, it's like that movie with the ring, right? What are the hobbits or whatever, with the ring, and it's a little bit like that. And then come 31 years, you're like, what the fuck happened? And I think you got to be prepared for that, and let your ego go and be a little more humble and have some humility. And then I think your transition into whatever it is would be a lot easier and more balanced.
I think back to what you're talking about, starting day one in the academy. I remember when I went in, it was very early, if not some of the very first couple classes, where the state of California pushed out the academy to include cultural diversity training. There were no blocks at all. If there were, I don't remember them, about your mental health. And I get where you're coming from. For most of us, 21, 22, 23 years old, sitting in those seats, anything mental health that I'm going to have to admit that there's something wrong with me is going to go over my head. I'm fine. Talk to the next guy. But you plant the seed. And then, like you said, 3 or 5 years in, you have a different type of meeting, put the right person,
exactly,
up in front, talking to them. And it's about creating that culture to where it just becomes the norm.
Yep.
And I've often said, I would like to see if we could strive that people coming into these careers, who they are when they came in is really close to who they are when they leave from a personal side. We're going to experience things are going to change. One of the other things that changes us is we tend to come into these careers very, very young, and we just become indoctrinated into that culture. And so now it's time to transition out. Maybe you don't go do anything else, but you just hit on a great thing of what's your transition going to be like for your family? How is your spouse going to deal with you? Maybe even if you're not home all the time, you're just home more, and what's the transition impact on them? And are you working with them to kind of create a transition plan to where, all right, honey, I'm going to now be under your feet 24/7.
And if you don't talk about it, it's going to hit you with like a 2x4 in the face. So I've worked with a wonderful man. He's a psychologist, Dr. John Becknell. Matt Domiancic put me in contact with him, went to a couple of retreats with him up in Orcas Island, and we've become dear friends, and he lives in Orange County. Just a wonderful human being. But when John and I worked together, he would ask how things are going. And then for 20 minutes, I'd say, oh, things are going great, and all this bitching stuff, I'm doing, or how I'm feeling, or I got it all together. And then he would stop, and he's just this quiet, kind philosopher kind of guy. And he'd be like, what would your wife, Jennifer, say? And like, holy shit. Well, she wouldn't say all the shit that I just said. What would your kids say? And I'll tell you, it was like almost a 180 difference. So it doesn't happen overnight. The switch doesn't happen overnight. It really takes a lot of time. You really have to work on it. And I think about that often. My kids would say, I'm not present. My kids would say, I'm on the phone, on the sidelines of a soccer game, fixing the world's force hire problem, at work. My wife would say the same thing. And I think at some point she just got so frustrated or sad that she just started being, super mom, like a lot of these women do, who are amazing, and do way more work than we do, I think, as men. And I think we need to give them a lot more credit. I think they see things from a different level than we do. We let our egos. I just started learning about egos and my ego, and I can't imagine in law enforcement, it's probably even double, just how we trip over it. We get in the way. And, so it's taken people like that in my life to kind of show me some of the pitfalls. It's not really what I think, but what does your wife think? What do your children think? What do your peers think? If they're honest with you, what do the people that work for you or your boss think, and give you some perspective? I think 360 evaluations are awesome. I would try to do that throughout my career, because if you're worried about what the people that you're supervising feel about you, there's something wrong. So I try to get that feedback. But most company officers or chief officers don't want to hear that 360 evaluation, but it's good for everybody.
I would like to see that as part of the promotional process.
Right. Yeah.
Do a review of all of the people that you work with or that are going to be working for you. What do they think about you as a potential leader?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the meat of the bone and that kind of stuff. And some departments try to do a good job, but it's more subjective. So, HR doesn't like that kind of stuff, but the feedback from the people that you've worked with, one of them is called like an AP, appraisal of promotability, something like that. But, it's too subjective for some people. So they want more of a check the box, objective testing process. And then that's where we get the turds, right? The smart people that maybe weren't great in the streets or their job, and all of a sudden they're your boss, and all of a sudden they're your chief of your organization. And
that never happens. Never happens.
And it's funny. I think a lot of frustration with cops and firefighters and military people. It's not so much the work. It's not so much the job. It's not so much we're all run bad calls. We've all had horrible experiences with the way things went down in the street and the calls that we went on. But I think most of our frustration is bad bosses and frustration within an organization or department. And maybe we can do better help. Maybe that's part of the mental health and wellness as well, that those are going to come up in your lifetime, and you have to be patient, and you have to be smart, and you have to be mindful of how to navigate those situations. And I was fucking horrible at it. I was like the bull in the china shop, just always wanted to, I had all the right answers, which I didn't, but they
just didn't apply to you.
They didn't apply to me. And I was more than happy to share that with my bosses. And, that's humility. And that's, looking back in as a 31-year-old, as opposed to a 56-year-old of when to open your mouth and when to keep your mouth shut, and when to be patient and wait for that not so great fire chief to just retire and then rebuild the organization. But, I could have saved a lot of gray hairs to avoid those type of conflicts and not go along with the flow, because that's not my style. And I think that's not a lot of people's style. Make aware of it, but you can be smarter and to achieve success with those turds.
There's one thing with not going with the flow, because you see how things are and you voice, hey, what about doing it this way? There are some people, though, that are on the opposite extreme. They're going to go against the flow no matter what. Hey, it's raining. No, it's not. It's sunny. No, look outside. It's raining. They're just going to be oppositional. But the thing for me that you were talking about, you've said it a couple times, and I don't mean this to be sarcastic, that, oh, cops, bigger ego or different ego than firefighters. But the one thing is that I think is the catch-22 for all of us. Veterans, all walks of first responders. We need people with those egos coming into the job.
For sure.
The Marine Corps did a great commercial on this. You know, are you the person who runs towards it, or you want the one who runs away from it? We are those people. I did law enforcement for 35 years. I'm sorry, I'm not walking into a burning building. That damn thing's on fire. I don't need to go in there. That's what you guys do. But you get young men and women who have that natural disposition of, I want to help. I want to put myself in danger. So you need that ego. But then you spend 20, 30 years doing this job, and that, regardless or not, that ego gets stoked because everybody you come in contact with, oh man, you were in that building when it collapsed, or you were in that gun. It's all those things that the rest of society who doesn't have the confidence or the ego to do looks at us and goes, I couldn't do your job. You know, so it's that catch-22 of, you need that ego to do this job well. You got to find a way to subordinate that ego, though, from a personal side as you move through your career.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there's hundreds of books written on this. And I'm sure this is a lot what the work that you do with your podcast. It's the alpha males that are attracted to these professions and these jobs. And those are the people you want, and those are the people that you need. And I think those are the people that I'd like to surround myself with if I'm in the trenches and when shit gets bad, and it has gone bad. But you need to learn how to harness it. And I never was given the tools to harness it. And so I think most of us don't, and we struggle. And I think that goes back to even the mental health and wellness that we talked about, or just, you know, having that badass SWAT team member come back and talk to an academy or a 6-year member to talk about the pitfalls and how to harness that ego, and the same thing on the fire side. And that's what we're kind of missing. And I just had to figure it out on my own. I think most of us do. And hopefully you can figure it out on your own before you retire, or before you get a divorce, or before, you know, you hit the bottle. But it's not easy. But we're fucking doing the same thing over and over and over. We're making the same mistake over and over and over with the military, with our veterans, with law enforcement, and with firefighters. So why aren't we getting it right? There's a formula out there. I think we can incorporate it. And the best way to do it, I think, is what you talked about.
So now that you're a peer support geek, but I see in the way you're talking that though it took a while for you to kind of open that door and step in and see the importance of it, it sounds like, though, you have completely bought into how important it actually is. Is this something that you see taking forward with you as far as that continual to give back and the continuing? Because if you're already connected with Maddie, it sounds like this is something that you've bought into.
You know, I bought into the philosophy. I bought into trying to live it in my own life. I just don't think I'm the best instrument to like teach it. I do on my own, for sure, with one-on-one or with groups, but I'm just not that, you know, I just don't think I'm the facilitator to talk to that audience in a more authentic way with friends and friends of friends. I do all the time. But to hook up with a group or something more on a formal level, it's just not my thing. And then if someone really needs help, because it's not my expertise, certainly always giving them the professional. There's so many resources out there to help them. But again, those people usually they're right of bang. They're the ones that are already fucked up. Those are the easy ones to identify. It's the left of bang. It sounds like kind of like you and I. The more the left of bang, they got their shit together. They're figuring it out. There's some issues at home and with themselves and their egos. They're going to get through it. But boy, if you had these instruments in place to come and talk at the academy, and then in 3 years and in 5 years, or maybe every promotional exam, you know, new promoted people, and talked about this kind of stuff, that families first. You know, my brother and I are very, very close. And he always said, hey, and it was probably some of his failures that led to this. It's health, family, work, rinse and repeat. Health, family, work. It's just little things like that I think we could tell people in the organization. But then when the organization tells you we care about your mental health and wellness, and you need to take care of your health and your family and your work. And then for firefighters, they ask you to work the next 8 days in a row, or, hey, you're force hired, you can't go home. You're like, well, wait a minute. We just talked about health, family, and work, right? Well, yeah, we talked about it, but you're force hired today. And so let's do a better job of staffing our organizations, making it healthy. I think, have a good, healthy gym, make sure they're eating well. My brother talks about this in his line of work is, what's sexy nowadays? It's not like, rise and grind. It's not like, get after it. It's don't cheat on your wife, live a good life, help your neighbor, drink a lot of water, get 8 hours of sleep, and work out. That's what we should be teaching, not the rise and grind, get after it. So I think, but I think who's sending the message is almost as important as what the message is. Because I'm not really going to listen to some Yahoo who the city pays for to come in and talk to my department, but I will pause and listen to somebody who has been in my shoes, who's been there, who's done that, who's gone on the calls that I've gone on, who's just 10, 15, 20 years ahead of me, saying, hey, I'm here out of love. I'm here out of support. I'm not here. It's not my profession. I'm here to share with you what worked for me. And as I said before, more importantly, what didn't work for me.
I think, unfortunately, with that, though, the people that they put in front of us to speak, if the person gets up there and everything went picture perfect in their life, yeah, they're going to have good information. For 98% of us, it's not going to resonate. They're going to lose us. You put the person up there who screwed up their career and did A, B, or C, maybe even to the level where they lost their career. Those are the ones that they're going to have the impact, because the man or woman who's, like you said, who might be sitting at that point in their career at the same point that person lost their career might kind of go, oh, that really hits close to home.
Right.
I've got nothing against people who, man, they grew up and had zero issues, great mom and dad, perfect life. They decided they wanted the military or first responder career. They went in, everything went perfect for them. Great. It's not all of us, though. There are a lot of us who didn't know what we wanted to do. Maybe we weren't the best at applying ourselves in school or whatever it was, but there's that compass inside of us that drove us to these careers, because at the end of the day, we want to help others. We just make stupid mistakes along the way.
And I'm a good example of that. I never thought I would be a first responder. I mean, the data or the driving force was not me. I mean, my family and nobody in my family was in public safety, at all. And I became that, and it took me a while to figure it out, and exactly what you just said.
Going into the tail end of your career, you promoted up to Battalion Chief?
Yeah, I ended up being, my last 2 years, I was in a temporary promoted position, our operational battalion chief, for 15 months. And then I went into our fire marshal position, which is something I didn't love, but it was a great experience for me, this admin position, for about 9 months. And then that's when I decided to have the surgery.
And how many more ranks potentially would there be above battalion chief?
That's really it for me. The next would be, I reported to the fire chief.
Okay. Yeah. The tail end of your career, there's two issues. We'll first talk about the back. So was it a culmination of multiple injuries, or was it a one-off event that caused it?
A little bit of both. So I've had 7 work-related surgeries in my career, and I was a big union guy. I was a president of our association and union, and then very supportive of just, supporting the rights of the men and women of public safety. So I was a big of, when you had surgery or had an injury, try to come back and work light duty, or try to give back to the organization if your organization has that opportunity. So I always came back to work as soon as I could, to either a light duty position or full duty when my injury was better. So 7 work-related surgeries was kind of no joke. And it just
all on your back?
No, different shoulder, ankles, back. So 3 back surgeries. And then the last one was the most significant, a 2-level fusion. And just the repetitiveness, I think, of the job, and trying to keep up with young guys on my crew, and not wanting to be that guy, that supervisor that stands back, that doesn't do that. And I think it takes a toll, on your body. And that's something to talk about with young people too. You can't be a patrol officer, your whole career, it's tough chasing down bad guys in your 50s or putting on your BA and running into a fire when you're 50s. It's just, especially when you're training, even if you don't have the call volume. So, so for me, it was the work-related injuries that kind of, I needed to do something. One, I needed to fix my back, for sure. And then coming back to work, would it be coming back to the engine or more staying in an admin role? And the way things worked out, it just worked out well to call it a day.
The last back surgery, would that have been something that, what's the long-term prognosis for that?
I feel great. I feel my activities I'm trying to increase my activities now. I feel great. I wish I would have done this earlier. I wish this would have been the first back surgery, but I think, as my surgeon says, I wasn't emotionally, physically, or spiritually ready for this 2-level fusion. And it was no joke, but it was super successful. I feel great. My discomfort, my nerve pain, all that is much better. And now I'm finding there's other body aches, that it really were masked because of the back pain. I'd never had knee problems or shoulder issues. And now I'm like, oh, and doctors say, well, you probably had them that whole time, but your back pain was so distracting. And you just got to take care of I don't think I took care of my body great. I worked out, I didn't eat super healthy, but, as a first responder, military, just they add up over the years.
I'm really interested to see 20 or 30 years from today, what the physical image is of a lot of the first responders. Because obviously one of the other things that is better today is the concepts of training and how it's applied from the start. But then you're seeing a lot more men and women who are really interested from early on and taking care of themselves physically, both how they eat, how they work out, that type stuff. And so I want to see how that's going to impact them 20 or 30 years down the road.
And I think that's one thing, unlike mental health and wellness, that agencies are doing better at is but I am in the South Bay, a fitter fire department, police department. I think when we eat together, it's healthier meals. When I came on, it was chicken fried steak. And now it's a lot of salads, and guys are stoked to cook together and eat healthy. We have solid workout periods and a good gym. And it seems to be a culture that has built where that wasn't there 30 years ago when I started. So hopefully that'll help with longevity. And it's funny because now that a lot of my friends in my generation are retiring, we have this finite window of that we have the time to do stuff now that we're not working. We have the finances to maybe do the things that we want to do. And we have the health to do the things that we want to do. But that window, as you know, closes pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to increase my activities and have fun and travel and do the things that I want to do with my friends and family that I wasn't able to do earlier because I had to work but I don't want to be crippled in retirement either. And when these should be the golden years to do fun stuff before they put me out in an old folks home.
The other half of the exit out, you kind of got yourself involved in a little bit of, I'll call it drama. I'll leave it to you to kind of explain a little bit of the backstory of it and what exactly it entailed. And then going forward, what was the outcome of it or what's come from it?
Yeah. So for us in our small department, it was not unlike what I think a lot of other departments experience. And we brought people in from the outside into high level positions, the fire chief and battalion chiefs, because no one internally wanted to promote. There was kind of a disincentive to promote. But if you put the application out to other areas that don't pay very well outside the county or outside the state, you're going to get a draw of a lot of people and just to spike their pension. So we kind of had a poor practice of doing that instead of investing in people from within the organization. And they had plenty of good people from within the organization. So, we had a bad run of some bad bosses, so to speak. And of course, I was the young loudmouth and the tip of the spear when it came to our association or our union on kind of battling those, and locked arms with a couple of our good guys. But, that comes at a cost, a personal cost for sure. And I think, again, everything is in hindsight. I think I enabled some of our younger members or the department to not speak out because they knew I would or others would. And I think you got to combat those type of issues together as a group and not let one or two or, just your union board kind of handle those issues because they're big cultural changes. And look, you're not always right. They're not always right. But it was a real struggle for us, a real challenging time, and not just changing some policies and cultural things, which a new chief's going to do anyway, but it became some ethical issues. And those were the big challenges where I just couldn't sit on my hands and just kind of bury my head in the sand or turn a blind eye and had to speak out. But, it came at a cost. And our organization did a vote of no confidence on a fire chief and his 3 battalion chiefs that he had hired. And it was really difficult, really challenging. As you know, most firefighters, they don't like that kind of spotlight. We just want to run calls and, sit in our lazy boy and watch TV. No, we just want to, just run our calls and do our thing and not have conflict. I think we really like to avoid conflict, if anything. So it was a really challenging time within our organization, especially for a small department. And I think that was about 6 years ago. So I've been gone for a year with my back. I think they're just starting to come out of that now, where good things are happening to the organization, promoting some good people within the department and trying to move forward. So they're going to be testing for a new chief here soon. We'll see if they get one from the inside or outside, but I wish the best for them. And I think, my whole thing is hire good people and then promote the great ones. And I think if organizations would do that, you'd build a rich culture of employees, dedicated employees. You have a turnover rate at the top level from outside agencies. They're coming for a couple different reasons, because they couldn't get promoted to where they work or to spike their retirement and come in. That kind of happened with us, which was a bummer because we took the toll, not the community. The guys still put on phenomenal service, but it was tough internally.
Going back to, say, like when you first came on with Manhattan Beach, was the culture always to bring up the next chief from within? Was that more of the norm back then? Or has this outside chief happened a couple times in your career?
It was more of the norm in my early career to promote from within. And then maybe halfway through my career, we started to see a shift or a change. And since I wasn't interested in promoting to those levels at that time, early in my career, I didn't think much of it. You're looking at the promotion next to you, not 3 levels up, or I certainly didn't. But looking back then, there was, and I think it was good people back then just were disinterested in promoting for whatever reason. It wasn't an incentive to promote, whether management employees got straight time or the benefits weren't comparable as opposed to Me Too language to the labor group, where it was a nice transitional promotion. I took a temporary promotion to battalion chief, I don't know, 8 years ago, under this bad chief that I was talking about. And about 6-8 months into it, I gave it back. And because he was just an unethical, guy to work for. But it was also a testing ground. I think everybody's watching. Well, if Dave could do it, we all could do it. And then he'll figure out the contracts and the salary and the benefits, and it'll make it a good thing. And it's a bummer it didn't work out for the organization, not for me. But if it worked out for me, then I think it would have been a wonderful stepping stone for the department. And I think now, 6-7 years later, I think it has. But I see that kind of a common thread around departments. It ebbs and flows. Some of our surrounding departments, they have some great chiefs from the outside, and they have some not so good chiefs from the outside. But I'm a big...
And the same thing from the inside. There's no guarantee.
Absolutely.
Just because that person, what they, or at least what you thought they were going to be like coming up from the inside, once you pin the bars on them and say, you're the chief, people change.
Right. And look, we have council members that they're the ones that have a strong influence of who promotes. And, council members or county supervisors, they come in for all different reasons. They didn't like the stop sign in their neighborhood, so now they're your local city council member, or they're into education, or they're into public safety, whatever it may be. They have their thing that they're into. But I'm a firm believer that, if you can promote from within and they're qualified and they're respected, even if they're a placeholder for a short time, I think it's good for the organization. Not to say that bringing people in from the outside is not good, but I think to the extent that you have good people, try that. And if you don't have anybody, then try to get a rock star from the outside who's not running from their organization or who is not promoting simply for a pay raise. Because we've had a couple that, it's a 30, 40, 50% pay raise coming to our organization. And who do you think they're going to be indebted to? It's not necessarily the community or the organization, but the city manager or their boss. And then that became the conflict with us. We had a butting of the heads with the past fire chief that I mentioned, who is also friends of the city manager. And I'll tell you, as a firefighter cop, most of the time you're going to lose that political fight, only because we have another job to do.
Right.
And that is their job. So, and it's not our specialty, and it's not what we like to do either. So I would highly recommend, and I look back, and it was such a great run because the 24 years previous to that, we had a wonderful relationship with the city. And when I was our president, it was all about, knowing the city manager and the HR director and the council and a wonderful relationship, not getting what you want all the time, but just having a good relationship to understand each other. And if you're all on the same page, knowing that it's all about service delivery and what you can do to the community, then you're much better off in having that good, healthy relationship. And then they can come to you and say, hey, we need something from you, from your firefighters, and say, yeah, we're on board. We're here to help you. And vice versa. When we need something for them, they're there for us, and not to fight and argue over a percent or something in the contract, and just treat each other fairly and respectfully.
I was fortunate. I worked also for a smaller agency in LA County. I was the last person hired under the chief who had been there for years, and not that he was overly revered or anything. It's just when he's there that long, you learn how to work with that chief. And then we went through a series of, outside hires. And again, like you mentioned, there is no perfect crystal ball. You don't know if an inside hire or an outside hire is going to be the right one or not. The other thing is, though, is what a lot of people may not understand is the chief of a fire station or the chief of police is not hired by the fire department or the police department. It's hired by the city council and the mayor and the city manager. And so oftentimes they don't know the needs of that first responder agency. So there's so many tentacles to making that decision. But I look at my previous organization, they went through this phase of some outside officers. And then the last, I think 4 now, have all been homegrown, bred from the bottom. Every one of these guys started as a police cadet with this agency and worked their way up. So I think there's something to when if you can establish a good culture and then bring those people up through that culture, then they're just going to keep moving that good culture forward.
Absolutely. And I think the culture is so important in our field. But when you bring in people from the outside, that culture is just a reset.
Yeah.
I use the analogy of the military, the Marine Corps, or really any branch, I guess. You could remove that leader for a long period of time, and that culture, that organization is still going to thrive because they have this strong culture to keep going, that the organization won't allow a lack of a leader to derail their mission. But I think the fire department is different. And what we use is we had so many turnovers. I think we had 6 chiefs in 5 years. I think some of it was intentional. But every chief comes in and they take a jackhammer to the tile or that the phrase or the leadership mantra that the last chief embedded in the foyer of the lobby, and the new chief comes in, jackhammers that, and puts in his own his own words of strength or wisdom. And then a year later, you get another chief that does the same thing. Well, how can an organization lock on to the mission when that keeps changing? And you're right, council members or county supervisors, who they hire, they have a different vision or a mission for the organization. So until you kind of, have a good leader that brings everybody together and you really set the values of the organization and you set the mission and the vision and live it for 30 years, 50 years, or like our military, over 100 years, then you have a rich culture. And I love that these cadets feel they feel valued, that they want to be hired in that organization, and they feel this sense of organization. They feel this sense of they want to give back to this culture. I think the real win is you get a 16-year-old cadet And in 30 years, they're the chief of the organization, because it's about the community and it's about the organization, and it's not about self, probably for those people, as opposed to those who bounce around from one place to another. Sometimes you need that. Some organizations, you need a reset. You need to bring someone in from the outside and reset and change the culture and move forward. But once you have a rich culture, I don't see why you can't pick great people from within the organization to continue that mission and that vision.
Yeah, because if you have, on the flip side, if you have a culture that is toxic to the point of being an atomic bomb, yes, good, bad, or indifferent, bring somebody in from the outside, let's see what we can change. But there's so many little subtleties to that. Person comes in, they were hired by this current city administration. That city administration changes in 2 years. That chief is at will. Hey, we don't like you. We're not, so there's so many nuances to it. The area that I wanted to hit on, though, is you brought up the fact that early in your career, you didn't look at promoting as that wasn't me. And then we've all experienced this. The people who might be really good for an organization, they don't want to give up. Man, I really like this team that I'm working on. Oh, if I promote, I don't get to do, I lose this. And here's my little soapbox. If you truly believe in your organization and you want the best for your organization, sometimes the selfless act is to say, I am actually, and again, that ego thing, but if those around you are saying you would be a good leader, it's time for you to kind of go, I've spent my time with this fast team or whatever it is. I need to put myself in that position to move up for the betterment of the organization.
Absolutely. And I didn't shy away from it. When I was a young member, when you're a young firefighter, a young cop, you don't think about promoting in your first few years. Once I did, it was the right fit for me. And I think promoting when I did, but then I stayed in that rank for a long time, 20 years. And I don't think that's healthy either. I think every 10 years, it's nice to kind of move into another rank or promotion or detective bureau or fire prevention, whatever it may be, to learn and grow. So transitioning to those positions, I think, are healthy for you and healthy for the organization. But I'm a big believer, and a lot of my buddies who MF management or who, ride on the engine or as a cop, really trying to pull them aside if they have value and saying, hey, stop motherfucking the organization. You need to step into that role. One, you'd be very good at it. And I think when you're in these meetings with the doors closed, you'll understand why certain decisions are made. And if you don't like them, you can voice it. And but don't tank the organization. I think a wise boss told me once, hey, disagree with me privately, but please agree with me publicly when you go out and talk to the crew. And I think that's really good advice. I wish I would have taken that a little more to heart, because I think that helps the organization. It's hard to do when you work for a shitty boss, but if your heart is about the organization, it's good for the organization. Don't say anything negative, bite your tongue, unless it's a real ethical or safety issue thing. But, I became the one that yelled from the mountaintop of, bad bosses. And it's just, it was immature, or just didn't need, it was out of frustration or not knowing what to do. And being in a small organization, probably too, as opposed to let the tide pass. I don't need to scream it. Everybody else sees it. And soon enough, the community or the city council, the city manager will see it, and they'll replace that person, and we'll move on to smoother waters.
It's funny what time and maturity does for us.
Huge. And that's why it's so important, I think, to bring back more mature people to the operators in our field, to talk to them about the pitfalls and the landmines that we stepped on, and we want the younger generation to avoid them. And I'm a big fan of the younger generation. I know we hammer them, and the generation ahead of us hammered us. I mean, I remember getting hired on, and the old timers said, oh, you don't know how to turn a wrench. You don't know anything about an engine. You can't take this apart and put it back together. And they were right. I couldn't. I'm not a real mechanical kind of guy. I learned, to do things by listening and watching. But, some of my biggest mentors, in a sense, is the younger generation. I see some of these, or I should say, who inspires me, are some of the guys that worked for me, and they're hardworking, and they're a great attitude, and they're good family people. I see some of the other stuff that we talk about with this generation, but I also see some of the great stuff, and you can't blanket them with a broad brush.
Right.
The same that you shouldn't blanket our generation from the generation ahead of us. I think we all love to do it, right? Oh, that generation, fuck, they suck ass.
Well, I think one of the sad things too is that when you get older, where I'm going is I'm now old enough to, the default is, oh, those millennials. We've bypassed the millennials at this point, but in total, I think the young men and women coming into these careers are doing a lot of good for these careers. And I think one of the things that they're coming to the table with is they understand, and as odd as this is going to sound, they understand it's just a job. It's just a job. It's not my identity. It's not what I'm not going to give you my life for this job. Where when we were starting out, like I said, phone rings, you're there for it, or you get into those, my side of the table, you could become a detective or whatever. And it's easy just to immerse yourself in work for no other reason than just because it's work. And I think a lot of the young men and women are like, I'll do a good job. I'll come to work and I'll work hard. But man, when it's time for me to go home, I go home.
It's funny you say that, because that's probably the healthier and the right perspective, yet it would turn me off, like these ungrateful kids that aren't working overtime or aren't, here for the organization or putting in double time, like I am. And even now, I think it's still a turnoff a little bit when they have that attitude, yet I'm kind of preaching that was my fault of not having a little bit more of that attitude. So again, I think it's that balance of not just clocking in and clocking out.
True.
And not always being there 24/7. And you got to find your own way of finding that balance to be there for the brotherhood, be there for the organization, be there for your family, be there for yourself. One thing I've realized is I don't have all the answers. And there's a lot of people, especially these days, with social media, with podcasts, everyone's got the fucking answer. And you almost feel overwhelmed. Like, if everyone's got the answer, I don't. Then you find out, these people have embezzled money, or they got fired, or they're in jail, whatever it may be. And I think, look, everyone's got some great ingredients. I think some work better for others. And what I've found finally at this stage of my life, and I could have done a better job in my career, is maybe take a little bit of an ingredients from each person, take in the good, hold out the bad, and make it your own. And I've kind of done that through my career, is just take the ingredients from different people. Sometimes it's 50%, sometimes it's 80%, sometimes it's 2%. Sometimes it's, I don't ever want to be like that, but it's an ingredient that helped me. But make it your own. Don't be so, not insecure, but so influenced that people have their shit together. Most of them don't. Find out what works, find out what doesn't work, and make it your own, because no one has all the answers. I don't care how squared away they seem to be. But create your own recipe, so to speak, with your own ingredients. And then don't be afraid to share it. Share what works.
Your success should not come because you aided in somebody failing. If you're going to succeed on your abilities and your merits, and have no problem competing against somebody else. If they end up being better than you, or they compete or test better than you, don't fault them for it.
One of the interesting times in my career, I would always stay up till midnight helping guys, running emergencies on the board for a promotional exam and exercise simulations, we call it. And I'd always do it for, anybody who would ask, but it would always be my shift or the brotherhood that would who else would want to stay up till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning to do that. And then one afternoon, one of the guys that I would call kind of a turd, or someone that I wasn't super interested in, asked for my help. And it took me back. It's going to be a lot of work and a lot of time. And that was kind of a growth moment for me to say, I don't think they'd be good in that position. I don't think they had the heart. I don't think they were really intentional in doing it. But, I'm glad I took the time to do it. And what I always say is I'm on this train, and I hope it's in a positive direction. I hope there's good people on this train. And if you want to, the turds are going to be thrown off the train. But if you want to jump back on at any time, you can. But it's got to be real. And we're going to see through you very quickly, and you're going to be put off on the next stop if you're not authentic and you're not genuine in where your heart is in this organization. So, helping those people and being a mentor to them, which I think I shut out those people for a long time. Again, just another growth moment, but it took 30 years to get to that place.
Well, and you factor in human personality. You're going to come into these careers, you're going to bond with certain people, you're not going to bond with others. And it's real easy to get with a group or get with a person and think that they have all the answers because you feel connected to them. And where I'm going with this is, but don't overlook the people just because you may not connect to them on a personal level. You may not like them for whatever reason, but like you said, everybody's got the ability to teach you something. Don't just get so insulated with just one group within your organization and all you feed on is what that group is saying. There's a lot of other information out there. Challenge yourself to think outside that group.
Absolutely. And for me, it was taking a step back and say, what's good for the community and what's good for the organization. And the best thing is to raise everybody up to a higher level and try to take something from them too. But yeah.
Have you stayed connected to snow skiing or the beach?
I have the beach for sure. I live in Redondo Beach, and I still have a lot of relationships, there with the ocean and skiing. Yeah, but it's been put on hold a little bit with my back surgery and stuff like that. But I was just up in the mountains, and it snowed in Mammoth recently, and it's just kind of good for the soul just to be with nature. And we all have our own place that makes us feel good. So for me, it's the ocean and it's the mountains for sure. And I look forward to increasing my activities and doing the fun things that I enjoy doing, scuba diving and spearfishing and snow skiing.
Being that your retirement is literally around the corner, you have plans long-term, what you're going to do?
Not really. I'm just kind of figuring it out. I know I don't want to consult or go back into some fire service thing or teaching. That's not my thing. I'm kind of moving on towards that. I think I just want to reconnect with my wife, just love on my 3 daughters and follow them like an incessant dad wherever they go to college and school. And, just trying to figure it out. I'm not opposed to doing some things here and there, but I'd like to enjoy this, like we talked about, this 20 years of health and some financial security and free time that I've really never had before. I mean, I've always been pretty active and pretty social, but kind of continue that into retirement.
Well, as you said before, you have the gift of gab. And just in my time being able to sit here and talk to you, I really hope that you find a way to stay connected to, especially the fire service, because you do have a lot of experience, but you've got a lot of wisdom that you've learned over time, and you've learned the hard way that a lot of young men and women need to learn.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And we'll see what the future holds, but I'm always there for the men and women that are behind me, because so many people were there for me. And I think, in closing, it's all about paying it forward and being a mentor. I would not be where I am today without the wonderful mentors that I had in my life that I didn't even realize were mentors. And I think we need to pay that forward in the military and police officers and firefighters. So in my small world of firefighting, I hope, if nothing more, that the people that I have helped in a little way or contributed to them, that they pay that forward to the people that are coming on the job and establishing that strong culture and providing a great service to whatever community they serve.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Hey.
I wish you the best going forward.
Thanks so much, Paul. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.